Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Professor Pauwels absolutely killed it in this episode. You're going to love it. How about getting at the end of this a checklist of how to increase sales? How about knowing what two of the most common mistakes marketers make are? What about knowing if a discount or doubling your budget is going to drive sales? All that in this show.
And one final note, if you love listening to this podcast, please leave a review in Apple or Spotify. We really appreciate it.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the show today. We've got Professor Koen Pauwels, a distinguished professor of marketing and vice dean of research at Northwestern University, adjunct professor at the BI Norwegian Business School, consultant to a whole bunch of companies. Some of them you might have heard of, like Amazon, Microsoft, Unilever, Sony, Old Navy. Author of multiple books and dozens of papers. Awarded for best paper on significant long-term contribution to marketing in the Journal of Marketing Research. Koen, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. Just one correction, Mark. I'm at Northeastern University.
Oh, sorry.
University in the U.S. Northeast.
Yeah.
Northwestern is the other region of the.
My mistake. I had it written as Northeastern, and I somehow spoke incorrectly. So sorry about that.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're here too. Unfortunately, V can't join us. He had a bit of a 911 fire to put out at work, but we're excited. I'll catch up with him afterwards, but we're excited that you're here. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just a bit of a thought starter. So there's a lot of companies that mandate that successful marketers have a strong background in data-driven decision-making.
Yeah.
And so I think the implied implication for that is that I'm stumbling over my words. Data-driven decision-making is superior in all forms to any other kind of decision-making, like, say, intuition, which is okay and understandable, but it's rare that anybody puts up in the job post or asks people to use evidence-based decisions. So I'm so excited to have you here because this is a huge area of focus that you've spent time on and contributed to. And so maybe, like, before we get into all the questions around that, maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you into this realm of marketing effectiveness and evidence-based marketing.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Belgium, as you can still see from my unpronounceable name and my accent. I got fascinated in marketing actually because I come from a very rational, functional household. So in my teenage years, I was just completely flabbergasted by people wearing these heavy ski jackets in the summer, apparently just so they could afford to go to Switzerland in the winter to ski. So I got fascinated in marketing, I would say, because of these seemingly irrational decisions. And then marketing effectiveness, I love kind of psychology, I love math, and so the combination really spoke to me. To your general question, right? So I think DDD, right, data-driven decisions, it's really kind of a catch-up maneuver. So we have known from, for decades, there's actually a very nice paper that says that the data plus, or the model plus the manager is better than either the model or the manager, which is still relevant in the age of AI, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people originally got in marketing partly because they hated math and analysis. And so you see that has changed in, I would say, the last 2 decades when there's just more data available. But that doesn't mean that there's no role for intuition. I would say, au contraire, intuition, instinct, and kind of this spark of human creativity, right, that seems to be lacking a lot of the AI generated stuff these days. I think it's absolutely essential. And I must say, so in my capacity, I don't just teach marketers. I also teach financial people. I teach analysts who want to learn marketing.
Right.
And for them, it's just the opposite, right? They have data. They know how to predict stuff.
Yeah.
But they have little thought for what it means and how to explain it to people who you, for instance, ask for funds for your new venture. Because they're really kind of, at the moment I'm teaching them, kind of lack the instinct to make something from it, what we get from our human experience and from, just being a marketer in practice for a long time.
Yeah. I'm interested in, like, especially having been from Belgium, and you talked about the ski suits or the ski jackets in the summer. Like,
Yeah.
is there a different experience that marketers have in, maybe you can speak to Belgium more specifically than, say, North America in your time here, or maybe Europe in general?
I would say so. So in the early 2000s, right? So my dissertation is long-term marketing effectiveness, and I started in pricing, and then I added marketing communication, product distribution channels, because I really wanted to advise senior managers about what to spend their money on.
Yeah.
And I saw in that one, so I translated my findings in dashboards that you would use as tools and give to decision makers inside companies. And I saw a clear division between, in America, in Northern America at least, people have this keep it simple, stupid, right? So when you talk
Yeah.
about the dashboards for your business, they compare it with your car dashboard.
Right.
You have like maybe 5 to 10 kind of dials, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So keep it simple. In Europe, people kind of more have the analogy of an airline dashboard, right? So when you go into the cockpit, you say 20, 25, 30. So they really want comprehensiveness over conciseness. And so you see that coming back in how they handle marketing effectiveness. So for instance, a lot of the kind of the opinion leaders, right, are from the UK, are from from Germany, and a lot of my early consultancy was in Germany, because managers, when they hit a problem that they thought was a bit too tough for them, the first thing that they thought about was to contact their previous marketing professor. And if it was about effectiveness, sometimes then that person referred them to me.
Yeah.
And so they really want kind of a more comprehensive, and they want to dig a bit deeper, look under the hood of the car or the airplane, if you want that analogy, to see what is really going on. Whereas I think in North America, managers more have this, okay, this is not for me. I trust you to do your analysis work. And I just have to kind of trust you to get this doing, but don't over communicate to me.
That's interesting. So on that note, like, how, and maybe this differs depending on where you're at, but how would you define marketing effectiveness, having spent so much time in this space?
And this is really important, right? So effectiveness is literally reaching your goal. And so I make always a very big kind of distinction between efficiency, which is bang for your buck, right? So how much do you get back for every dollar, whether it's US or Canadian, that you spend? So your goal very often in marketing, a lot of the things I teach is, as a marketer, to make your goal aligned with what your boss and your boss's boss wants, right? To get this goal alignment within. And so in a for-profit company, that typically has to do with top line or bottom line, right?
Yeah.
So very often as a marketer, as a CMO, for instance, what the company really wants you to do, for instance, is increase revenues by 10% next year. And then it's up to you then to say, well, how do I really have to move the needle to get to that financial goal?
Yeah.
And that could be, increasing awareness among prospective customers. That could be kind of cross-selling or upselling to existing customers. So this is where your industry and company experience gets in. And then to get to those goals, then you have the more specific kind of marketing campaigns you can do and so forth, right? But so effectiveness in marketing is really moving the needle. And so that could be kind of the financial goal of getting to the 10% revenue increase, or getting more donations if you're in not-for-profit. But then within that, it is kind of, hey, do I really get a lot more people aware of my wonderful brands? Do I get more people to consider it, to check for information online? So that's effectiveness. Whereas efficiency is kind of, do the best with the limited resources you have to get there.
That's like your cost per idea.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like a cost per idea. Like, yeah.
And the reason this is so important is because, a lot of times you hear things about return on investment, whether it's a good or bad idea in marketing, right? And return on investment, as it's calculated financially, is an efficiency metric, right?
Yeah.
You get kind of the money you make for the company divided by your investment. And so the most efficient stuff is typically very small stuff that doesn't really move the needle, but it's just very quick and dirty. And so if you're a smaller company or you're very limited in your resources, efficiency may be extremely important. But for most of the mid to larger companies that I consult, a focus on efficiency makes you kind of overspend on very small stuff and forget about kind of the really big, which is very often the exciting and sexy marketing stuff. that you can do to move the needle, even if it costs a bit more per kind of impression.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I love the ROI is efficiency metric. It's a funny one though, because most people, when you talk to them about ROI, they would say like that is the goal. That is what means to be effective.
And I would say not at all, right? So ROI is a financial metric, and probably the best way to think about it is, your investment portfolio, right? I don't know how it is in Canada.
Yeah.
In the US, you have to invest your own retirement money, whereas coming from Europe, it's absurd, right?
Yeah.
So if you have, tens of thousands of companies to invest your money in for your retirement, right? You want ROI because everything is completely fungible. You can shift things around, whereas, you're marketing for a company, kind of, you have a few brands, and what you're really interested in is maintaining and kind of increasing, what these brands do for you. So you can have a lot of small activities that, together kind of keep it running or get you some more kind of lower funnel conversion, but don't really maintain the brands and get the prospects in for the long term. So in financial things, if you add up the small stuff, you get to something big. I would say in marketing, very often we do have to also spend on stuff with a lower ROI, but things that we can, and you can actually show that in data, right? That really move the needle on objectives that ultimately translate into the company goal.
Yeah. So fascinating. So, like, ROI would not be a key element of effectiveness then, because it's an efficiency metric.
So I teach this is I hope I pronounce the name correctly, right? Diageo, the big company of spirits. They have the 2x2, which I absolutely love. So they have an effectiveness and efficiency 2x2 of your marketing campaigns.
Okay.
And all the companies I consult, right? So I do the analysis and I always put it on the 2x2 myself. And then so some activities are just both effective and efficient. And you're like, hey, this is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So some activities are efficient, but not really effective. And then typically it's like, stop doing these things. So Diageo also said that, right? Hey, you haven't been able to move the needle. Think about something else.
Yeah.
And then they prefer over that one, they prefer things that are effective but not efficient. And why is that in marketing? I mean, I always say marketing is the hardest job in any company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're dealing with humans. You have to do something that your customers, will react to, that competitors, and sometimes regulators, won't have problems with. So you're trying to move, people's perceptions, people's behavior. It is the hardest job in any company.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can move the needle, then you deserve a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And then Diageo says, and I have experienced that in other companies, it's pretty easy to then next year say, okay, we're going to do this again, but can we do this more efficiently? So what you've done today was absolutely fantastic, right?
Yeah.
But maybe we spent a bit more money in it than we needed to.
Right.
So for the next year, can you slowly move it into the quadrant that is both effective and efficient? And that also means that we then free up money for your new initiatives. Because the disconnect I see typically between marketing and finance is that financial folks tell me, look, these marketing, folks, they come to me every year with a shiny new big thing that we absolutely have to invest in.
Yeah.
And when we then ask, so what can we cut from your existing stuff? They're like, oh, absolutely nothing. Otherwise, the sky will fall down. And so, one of the things I do is to kind of make marketers understand, and that's typically with data and analysis, well, which of the stuff you're doing used to be effective, but is no longer effective. What can you save money in, and what should you increase things in? And so in my experience, if you just do that once, then, financial folks almost fall off their chairs because no marketing person has ever told them that they can kind of reduce spending on something in marketing. And you get a lot more trust for your shiny new initiatives.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you're saying that, I was thinking about efficiency in a lot of ways. Like if you're repeating something, it becomes team effort because it's not just the marketing spend that's going to get you an efficient. It's also the product development, maybe like the distribution channels, customer service. Like there's a whole bunch of things there that make something more efficient. It's not just exclusively a marketing.
I completely, and that's, I think, another reason why marketing is the hardest job is you're right. It's not just that we are kind of, working externally, it's that we have to work so much internally to make everybody aligned in our company and to be the person that folks in production and the new product development want to talk to kind of, with so many things have to go right. Because one of the worst thing is kind of, nobody wants to fail, but you can also be too successful in your campaign.
Yeah.
But you get all of these prospective customers and then you can't handle the volume, and that's really bad. So you do have to prepare for success as well.
Yeah. One thing you had just mentioned was around data analysis. And so I wanted to dig into that a little bit, because at the beginning we talked about evidence-based versus data-driven. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are on the difference between those two things, specifically like when we have all these tools at our fingertips, like Google, Facebook, everything is like literally just puking data at us. And then is that the same as the same kind of data you would be using for analysis in terms of making decisions as like the evidence-based ideas? Like they're different data sets, I think, right?
Yeah, and so I always kind of warn people, and this is one of the key kind of misconceptions. Also, one of your questions, right? So a lot of people they look for insights where the light shines, and here is what I mean. This is the old analogy about the drunk looking for his keys, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this old story about a policeman at night seeing somebody on a street lamp kind of hurrying around the leaves, and he goes and say, "What's wrong? I lost my keys. I can't enter my home." And so the police agent helps the person a bit, and then it's like, "Are you sure you lost your keys here?" And the drunk says, "No, it was over there." And so why are we looking here? Because this is where the light shines. And so a lot of times people kind of just use their available data. And why is this so enormously misleading is because the data you get specifically for free for platforms, right? It's the data that they can measure and want you to use. And it's not necessarily the data that is useful for you. And so in my exercises, I always kind of start from your actual goals. And we work that out, and then we look at the available data, and then we ask the tough question: to what extent are these overlapping, right? And so, how good of a proxy, are they? So an interesting thing, for instance, is Facebook engagement. So after I got tenure at the Tech School of Business, right, I moved to Istanbul in Turkey for a startup university. And so the company, which was a car manufacturer I was doing consultancy for in the US, their headquarters in Turkey was right next door to my new university. So I went there in and say, "Hey, can I help you?" And they're like, "Well, couldn't we have a very big problem?" So this is 2009 now, right? So they're a car company that both in the US and Turkey has about, I think, 2% market share. So they really want to grow it. And they have all of these new cars coming out that they were excited to get people to drive. And they're like, "Well, we are so proud because we did what you, marketing professor, told us to do, be where our customers are. So we spent 30% of our budget on Facebook." This was in 2009, 30%, right, for a car company. And we're so proud because we are the number one Facebook car site in the country, even though we only have 2% market share. And, Facebook was used a lot in the country. But we don't see any uptake in our sales. How on earth is that possible? And I'm like, well, and we get all this engagement and so forth. And I'm like, well, this is so easy, right? What is the one thing that you need to get people to buy your cars? I always ask this because managers know their industry better than I do. And they said, "Oh, that's easy, test drives." So I'm like, okay, so you have some data on that one. And so we did the analysis, and all of their Facebook engagement did not get anybody more to do a test drive. And then you can dig deeper, right? Is it the wrong audience? Are we having the wrong message? And so forth. But this Facebook engagement metrics didn't tell them anything about how their business was doing, and didn't even got people in this necessary test drive. So I think kind of, if, yes, you want buzz, you want people to talk about your brand, right? But it's very important to just double check that there's at least a decent correlation and a movement in the same direction between the metrics you get and your ultimate goal, whether that's sales or something else that you really want to move.
Yeah, the light, the looking for your keys under the light thing is really a great analogy to that, because there is like engagement or follower count is something that's super prevalent on all these channels, and people go, "Well, we want more followers." well, why? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And there's,
Uh,
yeah, go
And,
ahead.
I think kind of the important exercise is also, so a lot of people are sometimes upset with the platforms or with influencers, right, that we're having now, because they oversell, their followers, their impressions. And I'm like, who cares? And here is what I mean, right? So if you have a model, right, that
Yeah.
links, let's say, influencer that you spend on an influencer with your ultimate sales, or the YouTube views with your ultimate sales. When the influencer now comes back to you and says, "Oh, sorry, I only have half of the actual followers, the rest are bots,"
Mm-hmm.
then why do you care? Because you know exactly, or approximately, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
always say in marketing, it's better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong. You know approximately how much more kind of sales spending $1 on this influencer gets you. So if the influencer now has kind of overdone the followers, that doesn't really enter your calculation. The same thing with YouTube views, right? So
Yeah.
if in comparison with, let's say, your TV advertising or your out of home, how much YouTube kind of ads really get you.
Yeah.
If you have made that connection, then if YouTube comes back to you tomorrow and says, "Oh, sorry, half of the views were bots,"
Yeah.
it doesn't really kind of bother you that much. So I'm like, I always show the benefits of making the link,
Yeah.
because it just makes you a lot more peace of mind in terms of what these platforms do and how they report stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. One of the thoughts I just had thinking about YouTube versus TV. And so before there was all these new channels and digital metrics and digital data and all that kind of stuff. When you put up a TV ad, you bought reach. And that's
Yeah.
what you did. That's really all you did. Whereas now you can buy engagement, you can buy leaks or link clicks, you can buy
Yeah.
reach sometimes. There's all these other things that are proxies of performance, but you're not delivering the same way. And so again, looking at the light, the keys under the light, you can almost see how you can just optimize a campaign for the thing that Facebook will allow you to optimize for, which isn't necessarily the thing that you're trying to do, which is reach people, get more test drives, get those kinds of ideas.
Well, so I would agree, but I would say reach is also a proxy metric in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately you want more than reach. So if
Yeah.
you kind of, and reach is indeed what the TV channels sell you. But yes, and it is really important. I'm not saying it's not important.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if you can connect reach to something that the people giving you the money, I always say, care about,
Yeah.
then you're just in a much better position, right? So
Yeah.
and that can be very approximate, but some way to do this. And I do agree that digital allows you to measure more what I call throughput metrics. So I'm an engineer by training, right? So I see things as input, throughput, output.
Yeah.
So let's say if output are, let's say, sales, right? And input is the marketing actions you do. I'm always looking and testing for good, KPIs in the middle.
Right.
And so I do think that digital has the potential to give you better KPIs in the middle. I'll give you one example, right? So my latest project was about digital billboards. So
Okay.
billboards is like the oldest thing possible.
Yeah.
And so digital billboards, you have about 8 seconds that just your thing appears, right?
Right.
And then it goes out. So the cool thing with this is that, we have ideas about people driving in their commute. And we can completely anonymize the data, which is also very important. But so we know kind of how many people drove by exactly in the 8 seconds that your ad was shown in the digital billboard.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of our things, this is a high involvement kind of purchase. So people really have to go online to check for more information. And then we have their online search behavior, right? And whether they come to your website.
Yeah.
And so people coming to your website for this particular kind of product is a very good kind of, KPI for whether they ultimately buy and convert. And we have some nice metrics there, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that we can say, hey, we can really tell you that it's incremental website visits, because we can differentiate between people who happen to be on the same highway, but like didn't see your ad because they happened to pass by at another 8 seconds and where another ad was shown. So if you kind of think through, then digital is a wonderful opportunity for you to kind of come up with some KPIs that are very good proxies.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, everything I'll try to connect in some way with what do we ultimately want to achieve.
Right. Yeah, like the test drive thing, going back to that too, right? Like
Yeah.
that's where that matters. Your profile was awesome, super interesting, but there's one, and you made a joke about the longest sentence ever, which is really funny. But there's one point where you talk about helping people avoid bad choices and make good choices in retail media. So I'm wondering, like, if you could just speak to that a little bit, because are there recurring bad choices that people are making?
So I'm somebody, this is a personality thing, right? So what one key psychological construct that I like is, they call it regulatory focus, and it's really whether you're mostly promotion focused or prevention focused.
Right.
So promotion focused people see life as opportunities that you take or you don't take. Prevention focused people see life as disasters that you either avoid or don't.
Yeah.
And I have been talking to managers with both things, right? So what I used to do when I was a junior consultant is to kind of show the benefits. I mean, this is how much money I can make you or save you. And I realized a lot of people, specifically in finance, are completely not interested in that one.
Yeah.
They mostly want to avoid disasters. And so I've kind of reframed my message in saying, okay, at least I can help you talk through and kind of, be a sounding board
Yeah.
for some of the choices that you're a bit uncertain about, and you're like, I feel something is maybe wrong with it, but I can't put my finger on it, or I won't be able to motivate my suspicion to in a meeting, for instance, right? And I do see, so the one recurring bad choice, and every marketer probably knows this, right, is assuming your customers are like you. And so that comes back in so many ways, right? So, for instance, if you really, live a brand and you're paid to be a marketer, then you think also sometimes that your customers really care about your brand.
Yeah.
And so in 2 weeks, I'm visiting the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, right, in Adelaide,
great.
Australia. And I think Byron and Jenny have done a fantastic job in convincing marketers like, hey, most people, specifically in low involvement categories, they care so little about your brand that kind of, that's not something that you should start with. So I agree with them that a lot of marketing campaigns kind of assume you're already in the room and people have given you permission to talk about how fantastic your brand is. Whereas, a lot of times, you really have to kind of get people's attention in the right way to talk about this. So I think assuming your customers are like you is one big one. I think the second one is, and that goes back also to my time at Amazon, where this was very much discussed, is what you touched upon in kind of, data and anecdotes. And so Amazon did this extremely well in the sense that, all the way from the top, right, from when Jeff Bezos was still the CEO, it was basically said, look, we spend a lot of time on data analysis and on statistics, and we have great people to interpret the data, but there's also the instinct about what's right and what's wrong. And so basically, typically there was a chair left in the meeting room for the customer, right? So for us to say, hey, but I instinctively feel that's wrong for our customers. So even if the data tells us, and I'll give you a quick anecdote that is less sexy than my other stuff, right? So I was working for a very big restaurant chain that was known as a very comfortable kind of third place, right? Between your work and your home, you came there also for work meetings, for meeting a first date. And so in one of these meetings, the chief operations officer stood up and says, I have a great way to save us millions of dollars. And it's to replace the toilet paper in our toilets from the 3-pack very soft thing to just the one sheet that you find in like airports. And this is going to save us millions of dollars. And I was the only one saying, no, this is wrong. And I don't have the ROI calculation of how much money we might lose in the long term if our customers kind of upset with that one. But I'm like, look, we're overcharging for our meal and our drinks. And the main reason people come there is to feel comfortable, and comfortable toilet paper fits with that. This is just something that... and I mean, I may only get 1 or 2 customers to kind of say that, right? But I think as a marketer, I mean, you have the instinct, you talk with customers way more than other people in these executive meetings. So I think it's really your duty to stand up for this, even if you don't have the data to really feed into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned was people assuming that customers are exactly like you. And so there's this idea around, I think it's quite prevalent in marketing, that the idea is like, brand loyalty, customers gotta love us, and everything we're doing is building towards this customer love idea. And then they
Yeah.
become advocates, and like that's where the real money is made. And so,
Yes.
because they have to be like us, I think, is part of the rationale. And so, is
Yeah.
there, like, you mentioned that specific one with Byron and Jenny and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, but like a lot of us have been trained on this Kotler-esque kind of world where that isn't necessarily exactly what Kotler was preaching, but that idea around loyalty is definitely in a lot of the work from them. And so there's this old world of marketing, and now there's this emerging new world of marketing where that's not the case. So is there a difference in your mind, or like a delineation between, or are there other, I guess, indicators or symptoms that you can identify as being like old world thinking?
So I think in marketing, there's a lot of old world thinking, right? I mean, it's almost like, I think this is a quote from like 100 years ago, that every kind of business manager that claims that they don't care about theory and they don't read economics journals, they're always following some defunct, deceased economist. So everybody's following some theory, they just don't realize it.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of the old school thinking, so Kotler is basically kind of 60s. Andrew Ehrenberg, the late Ehrenberg, right, where the Ehrenberg Bose Institute kind of feelings are founded on, is basically did his best work in the 50s and the 60s. So this is really old, folks, right? Yeah. So much fantastic work has been done in, I would say, the 90s and in this century in marketing academia that practitioners just don't know about. And so I've been very concerned with this and trying to bridge this gap with blogs and making all my papers available for free, right? And I'll give my website for this one. But so I think, they're both kind of old school thinking. I think what has happened in practice is that people run too much in one direction. And so for instance, yes, brand loyalty does matter, right? If you could be like Apple with, Apple boys and girls, fan people that kind of defend you, and that you get all of this free publicity just for announcing a new product, that would be perfect, right? But we can't all be like Apple, and we shouldn't, strive, I would say, to be that. What I do think is that segmentation, targeting, and positioning is very important, right? So segmentation helps you to realize that customers are different from each other in meaningful ways that you can then use. Targeting helps you decide kind of, which of these segments really fit with your competitive strengths and with your resources right now. And then positioning is really kind of, what is the reason for people, number one, to take you serious in the category? This is what Kevin Keller calls a point of parity, right? So if you're going for, a consultancy, why would you consider Kun Powells, right? Is he a serious player? And then your point of difference is, within the consideration set, why would people choose for you? Right. And I think this is still enormously powerful. I think what practice have run too much with is going deep into brand personality and brand love, right? This whole idea that brands have to be mysterious and sensual. I mean, in my research, and I showed this is only kind of, a few categories in mature markets. I mean, people in India and China typically don't care whether you're mysterious and sensual. They want something that is really functional, that other people also use, and that is reliable, and that signals their status, right? So it's very different from what we have. So I think practice ran a bit too much with it. At the same time, so kind of Ehrenberg and the kind of the other people kind of espousing the ideas, right? They're really what I call behavioralists, right? So the old ways is that you have to change the attitude first, and then people will buy. And they're saying, no, you should just change people's behavior, because what they tell you on a survey is just a reflection of their behavior. And you should just change their behavior. And I think that's a bit extreme too. It applies in some situations, but in like moderate to high involvement products, I do have to change your minds and ideas about, if I make a Kun Powells bank and I want you to convince to put your money there, I will have to, improve your thoughts and feelings about that particular new venture before I can get you to change your behavior. So I would say kind of these old ideas are very complementary. And they have been kind of, really much more digged out in the last, I would say, 30 years of marketing academic research. And I'm very much kind of always looking forward to making that more accessible to managers.
Yeah, and I'll definitely put a link into your website where it has all the articles. It's like amazing
Okay,
that you
yeah.
have all that. It's great. It, so many questions I want to ask you. I'm trying to figure out which one to go to next. But like as far as big theory or general idea around marketing and how it works, and especially, marketing meaning advertising. So
Yeah.
a lot of people would go, and I've heard this before described as like strong force versus weak force theory. The idea being that advertising works and predominantly perceived by North Americans is how I've heard this,
Mm.
that it is a strong force. Like you put an ad up, there's an instant response. And so there's a lot of work and research, and I know you've investigated some of this. Like, what is the mechanism of how advertising works, and how we used to think about it maybe versus how we think about it today with all the evidence that we have?
So I also always call it a weak force, right? So advertising is a weak force. Maybe another analogy is it can get the horse to the water, but it can't make it drink.
Yeah.
And that goes back to your thing about the internal alignment, right? So I do think that advertising can make people aware of your product and look for more information. But then, they look now increasingly online, what have other consumers said about you in your, Amazon customer reviews? What information do you have that they can really, understand who you are as a company, what your product can do for them, and everything that you put out, your customer service. So I think in the 4 Ps, right? And I think that's still very old school and very important.
Yeah.
So Kotler thought about this as a marketing mix. You're making a delicious cake.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, communication is an important part of it, but your product, where you sell it, for which price, is extremely important. So I think the mechanism is, advertising is something that people who are exploring are in the mood say, hey, this is interesting, and then can dig deeper. So one of my kind of latest forays is into retail media, right?
Yeah.
And what I find so fascinating about it and why it's exploding in popularity in both North America and now in Europe is that, we can actually catch consumers when they're in the mood to explore and buy products. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key difference, right? So instead of interrupting somebody's mood. So in my previous papers, I show a much higher effectiveness for what I called content integrated marketing, right? People now call it contextual marketing.
Right.
And it's basically you go to a website for a certain purpose as a consumer and the ad aligns with that purpose versus not. And so a lot of the time you go, retargeting is a typical example, right? That is a lot less effective than managers believe because I have just checked something out 1 or 2 hours ago, right? And then I decided either not to buy it or, maybe I bought a competitor, you don't know. And then now I'm on a website to check the latest sports things. And now you show me an ad that has nothing to do with sports, but goes to what I was. So people get really annoyed with that one.
Yeah.
So I think kind of, the whole idea of the right message to the right customer at the right time. And I think we're getting much better in understanding the right time. The other thing that I wanted to say about it with advertising being a weak force, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we know this? And this is what I talk about. So a lot of managers kind of ask me constantly, what are the benchmarks in our industry? I did something, I got a result. How do I know whether that's good or bad, right?
Right.
And I'm like, well, we have had hundreds of studies about how sales respond to price and to advertisers, hundreds of them. And they're all beautifully summarized, right? So if you're in a mature market for a well-known brand and you drop your price by 10%, by how much do your sales increase?
Yeah.
The benchmark is 25%. 25%, right? So price is enormously effective. If you have a mature brand and you double the advertising budget without changing the message, you double the ad plus 100%, your sales increase only by 5 to 10%. So that's my benchmark, right? And it's across industries, across countries, and of course you can be more specific. But so when you come to me with an advertising promise that, hey, for a known product, let's say Tide, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have this campaign, give me $2 million and I'm going to increase your sales by 50%. I'm like, oh my God, that is 10 times more than the benchmark. And it may be possible, right? But so what in your campaign, in the audience, and how you do that? And so I think that a lot of the academic work has been beautifully summarized in these benchmarks.
Yeah.
And so advertising is a weak force in the sense that it can't move your sales by that much just by increasing the spending. That doesn't mean it's not important, right? I mean, gravity is a weak force, and gravity is very important in our lives in physics. But it does put some more realistic assumptions also from your CEO about what your marketing and communication can actually do. And it's really working in cooperation with the other elements. And so as a marketer, even if you don't have decision power over new products and pricing and distribution channels, you should at least have a strong kind of foot in the door and a strong cooperation with kind of these other P's that actually have a bigger by itself power to move sales.
So that's fascinating. So the benchmarks I would put in a category of, well, that's evidence as opposed to just the data component. So it's awesome to have that. And I didn't know those numbers, which is great. But so often you get these instances where people go, marketing doesn't work. You guys are the coloring department. Well, whatever. Like, we'll just cut the spend when things are not going well. And then when there's a panic, they're like, hey, marketing, what can you do? Right. And then so the instinct, and I've lived through this a whole bunch of times, but the instinct is, well, let's get a discount and put it out in the market. And so, other than just, and that's just our common reaction to like a market force that's happening or a market change. Is there, you mentioned price, and I'm just curious, other than, and maybe it relates to the 4 Ps, are there other levers that you could pull aside from just putting a discount in a market that would be like kind of a checklist that you could think about?
Oh, that's a really good one. So to kind of very quickly increase sales, right?
Yeah.
So, well, there's this interesting part now also in business to business market that, 95% of all people are not in the market for your product right now.
Right.
5% are. And I don't know how you react to that statistics, but I think, virtually every marketer will be, hey, let's focus on people in the market then. whereas, Ehrenberg Boss is like, no, you have to spend on the 95% a lot. And I'm like, well, but how much, right? So I would say kind of, spending more of your resources, shifting it to more lower funnel makes a lot of sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have to bump my sales, instead of having to kind of pull people all through the purchase funnel, and looking for people who don't know about my brand, that I go for the hot leads. I go for the people that that I see from their website behavior or maybe from how they're interacting with my company, that are really, really interested in the product or what I'm selling, but just at the margin kind of they're a bit uncertain or they haven't made it a priority in their budget. And those are the folks to really convince, I think, if you need an immediate bump, right? I think Seth Godin calls that selling nuts to squirrels. So when you're pushed for sales, you try to get more sales in those folks that really desperately need your product, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point. On discounts, and this is something, for instance, that academia have shown, right? So in the 1980s, most of the advice was like, discounts are really bad for your brands. It makes your brand look cheap, and you shouldn't do that. And then I think about 1992, P&G took this all very seriously, and they stopped discounting, hoping their competitors would follow. It was very publicly announced. And instead, competitors were like, thank you very much for the market share. And they actually increased their discounts. And then P&G very silently went back to discounting. So virtually all my research has shown that, if you're a relatively well-known brand and your discounts are usual, then it doesn't cheapen your brand image. It's only when you're kind of new to the market and you discount with like 80% that people are like, well, wait a minute, what's going on with their quality? So discounts are not bad for you. And they can help you. I typically give the advantage of Coke, so I prefer Coke over Pepsi.
Yeah.
I moved from Belgium, where Coke and Pepsi are never on promotion, to the US in the end of the 90s, where they were every other week on promotion, right? So 1 week Coke was on promotion, the next week Pepsi. And there's all reasons why, which are very interesting. But so I never paid regular price for a Coke bottle anymore. I would stockpile them. Right, so I would, a 2-liter bottle of Coke, I think, was like $1.79 on sale. It was only 99 cents. So I would buy lots of these liters of Coke, And I would store them. And yes, my reference price declined, right? And I would never buy them at regular price anymore. But it kept me out of the market for other drinks. I consumed more because I had all these bottles of Coke. And probably Coke made a very good mathematical calculation. They have lots of margin on their product, as you know, that they would earn more money that way than otherwise. So I'm still, in love with the product. It didn't cheapen the brand image at all. I just got trained to buying on deal. So I think for your own brand, you kind of have to say, hey, do we still, because if you have lower margin, it's very hard to make money with discounts, specifically if you train people to buy on deal. Do we really kind of get money in the long term if we do that? And I think that calculation is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really good point, because the margin built into the product inherently matters. And so, but also, if to your point earlier, like if you're a new company and you're just discounting, that also is then building a brand as a discounted brand, and you're unlikely, by the sounds of it, or it would be harder to build more margin and increase price. So it sounds like it's a bit of a both, not either or.
Yeah, my very first paper, this was an undergrad, was about reference prices because I love them. It combines economics with psychology, right? Which is one of the reasons marketing is so fascinating. And so this is really important. So suppose like you only have a 20% margin. And I always kind of ask marketers, because a lot of marketers don't take that into their calculations, right? So if you have a 20% margin and you give a 10% discount, you will have to sell double as many products to make the same money net for your company, double. And this is even without the ad campaign that you need to communicate things, right? And so unless you kind of, know that you can sell double the products, right? Then I would go back to whoever, in finance, tries to pressure you in these discounts and say, look, we're going to make less money if we do this. And so I think kind of knowing the margin is important. One thing that I always love to show, right? So people always ask me, what is the optimal marketing budget? And there is a formula for that one. And you can use the formula even without knowing any data or analyzing any data, which I love. And I give a few examples in my blogs about this one. But one of the things is your product margin. And so the higher the margin, the more you should advertise, because, advertising gets people in the funnel or in the journey, right? And the more money you make per product you sell at the end, the more things. So for instance, if finance or operations for some reason have made the process more efficient and you make more margin per product, then you should also advertise more. And these kind of links, I don't see happening enough within companies. And that is kind of, that necessitate that you have some alignment about how these things, the mechanism work. And people in finance, operations, and marketing have some consensus about how to kind of push the overall goals forward.
Yeah, that's a great one. It kind of brings me to the last section. I know we only have a couple more minutes left, but one of the things you also had I've seen you written, I think it was maybe it's also in your profile, but how do we get there? So there's this idea around marketing effectiveness, there's this idea around old school versus new school thinking. Not necessarily to throw out one or the other. It's probably an and. And so for companies that are looking to make this transition, going from, or marketing leaders or business leaders, making this transition from, into more effectiveness and doing things better than what they were doing before, and improving. What kinds of strategies would you suggest, or ideas, or principles that you would recommend?
So first of all, I would say, read, talk to other marketers in your industry. That's always a great source of information.
Right.
But if you go beyond that, read a bit more broader, I would say. Instead of, just following one guru, I would read a bit more broader and see what resonates with you. And so I love Mark Ritson's thing about boatism, right? So if there's a dichotomy, like people online, also on LinkedIn, where I absolutely love the discussions, but people get rewarded online for taking a very strong stance and making things a bit black and white, right?
Yeah.
So I would say kind of follow a few more people and see what resonates with you, which is probably what may work for your company in your industry.
Right.
And then kind of, look for, in marketing effectiveness, I like this idea of steps or a ladder. and that, take inventory of what you can do right now and then move it to the next level instead of shooting for the moon, right?
Yeah.
So don't right away think, oh, we need the latest software and we need to buy this expensive vendor that can do this amazing stuff that has done for other companies. Other companies are not like your company.
Yeah.
So how do we move one level up? And I typically start with kind of, is there goal alignment? And, you don't need any data for that one, right?
That's a great one.
So do we understand what every important stakeholder in the company really wants to achieve, right? And then I would say, indeed, kind of put these goals out there and then see, can we get data on it?
Mm-hmm.
And then decide which proxies are okay, right? And
Mm-hmm.
which things you want to invest money to get better data. So that's typically a step. And then we can talk about things like, hey, how do you now turn the data into insights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it simple correlations, right? Or things you can show in a graph that makes people kind of excited and make them change their decisions? And then we can look at more sophisticated analysis, I'm now, for instance, a company I started is MMM Labs for marketing mix models. And so we have this automated AI-driven approach to estimate all the possible models and then to come up with wonderful insights there. So then you can look at better analysis, and then things like estimating more esoteric concepts like brand equity and so forth, and how that drives sales in the long run. That's kind of the far end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I would say kind of take some inventory about what you can do right now, and then we can help with next steps. And so in a lot of companies in the beginning, it's just really kind of goal alignment. And when we are ready to analyze data, what do we do? And then also, how will we change our decisions based on the data? So whenever somebody hires me to calculate ROI, right? The typical question I get is, what is the ROI of hiring you? And I'm like, well, that's so simple. If you're not willing to adapt any decision, my ROI is zero. I'm completely used to it, right? I mean, if you just call me in to justify a decision you already made, or you know that nobody's going to change. So there has to be some willingness of decision makers to say, okay, if I trust the kind of model or insights or data, this is how I'm willing to change things.
Yeah.
And then you can see, what evidence you need to kind of make that happen.
That's fascinating. So many things about that are interesting, but like the goal alignment is, I totally get that. Totally makes sense. But the decision-making component, I think, is really interesting, because then if you have a goal and you go, okay, well, what decisions do you need to make in order to achieve this goal? Then we'll find the evidence that is required. What would have to be true ideas, like a Roger Martin kind of idea? Like, we'll find the data that supports a decision, which then you can make to get us closer. But if it's just about reporting for the reporting's sake,
then people will throw it away, just like they threw away, the 80-page reports or the PowerPoint presentations that we used to have. And I think then people will just use shortcuts, right? They're like, okay, Google or Facebook gives us this data. We know it's imperfect, but we think it's directionally right. So let's make decisions on that one. And I also always make the distinction there, right? So online platforms, I trust them that their data is reliable. I don't trust them that it's valid. And so and I think it's an important distinction, right? So here is what I mean. So suppose that you have two Facebook campaigns, right? And one gets double the engagement on Facebook from the other one. Do I trust that campaign is better? Yes. Because I think Facebook consistently measures these things. So even though they have error in their measurements, the errors are systematic, I would say, as a mathematician, right? So I trust that one is better than the other, right? So you can make tactical within the platform decisions.
Right.
But if you want to go above and say, well, how much money should we spend on Facebook versus Amazon versus Google versus TV, now I need comparable metrics. And I can trust the platforms or even TV channels to give me comparable metrics. So then I have to make a very, very simple model just in Excel to basically show to myself, well, what does these things really get us? And for more engagement, how does that get us to our ultimate goal? So I trust platforms that they give kind of reliable data over time, and you can compare if you increased or decreased over time. And within campaigns on the same platform, I don't trust them to tell me, hey, the campaign on our platform was so much better as the campaign on the competing platform that you're contemplating.
Yeah, fascinating. Dr. Powell, this has been amazing. What can people find out? Where can people find out more about you, and what are you working on next?
Okay. So several things, right? So my website, marketingandmetrics.com, I
Mhm.
had no idea why it was still available, right? What I basically did is organize my, 100 plus papers by things that I think are, searchable. Like I have the 4Ps: product, price, place, promotion. I have big data. I have a section on retail media. And what I put there as an author, I can do that is basically the free version of my peer reviewed and published resource. So you can go there, you can just read the abstract, right? Or you can kind of click through and read the full paper. So I'm very, I'm paying my own money and I'm making this available for free. So I really love, people to use it even more. I have every Sunday I publish my LinkedIn newsletter on something of more kind of general kind of marketing interest. And then in December, I started the Substack. So when I resigned from Amazon Ads, I was like, hey, this is so fantastic. I'm no longer bound by PR agreements and so forth. I can actually talk very frankly about the good, the bad, and the ugly, within retail media and what does it get you and what are the limitations. So I have a Substack called Amazon Days where I talk about, both retail media, but also what it's like to work in the industry, and so I think these are key ways to follow kind of what I'm doing, and then yes, I'm very happy to answer questions specifically kind of by email or on LinkedIn all the time.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for this. This has been a fascinating conversation, so insightful, and I just really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, and hope to see you in the next occasion.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that. V.
Guess what time is it, Mark?
It is post-pod time.
Hey, what? There we go. I've never gotten a sound out of you, just like a little jingle or something. And here you come out of nowhere. I love that.
Out of the gates, hot.
I love that.
Just came back from vacation, V, feeling refreshed.
Oh,
got my radio voice on, got some emphysema with that. I don't know what happened, but no.
That's amazing.
So we didn't get a chance to do this interview together, but we had Koen Pauwels on, and I know you listened to the interview, and I listened to it again.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Holy smokes. A great episode. I decided not to join in. Full transparency, I was dealing with with an emergency at work, which really didn't allow me to partake. But man, you could tell why he's globally recognized as one of the biggest thought leaders or professors, if you will, of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved everything about it. Of course, I've got 2 pages of notes here just from listening from your conversation there with him. But honestly, I think it almost feels like there are the right professors in different spaces teaching the discipline.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's not many to Koen's caliber, unfortunately, and which is unfortunate because this is where you really want to be learning this. And no, it's a great conversation. Holy smokes.
Yeah, there were so many mic drop moments from him. I literally had to edit one part where my brain just malfunctioned because I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to ask the next question. I had so many questions in my head, and my brain just short circuited. So I actually edited that part out. But yeah, he's really, really good and so thoughtful about his approach. The one of the first things he mentioned was that in most studies that have been done like this, the model plus the manager is better than either individually. And it kind of, as I was re-listening to it, I was thinking about that because you've got models like a funnel or loyalty or things like that, right? Like these preconceived notions that cost 5 times more to make a customer than keep a customer. So that's a model. And he referenced at some point, whenever you talk to somebody and they ask them where they got that idea from, a lot of times it's from some dead guy that came
some dead guy. Yeah.
So you have the model that we're all using as sort of software.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think about these models as a software, and
you can upgrade the software
Mm-hmm.
rather than just using the same old, same old. And so we talked about that later on too, because there are some models that are still totally relevant. In his mind, the
Yeah.
STP was one of them. Some of the other
Mm-hmm.
ones, not so much. Like the brand love, for sure, I know was one of the ones he talked about was not
Mm-hmm.
productive. So the model plus the manager, I thought was really good, because when you can start thinking about a model freely, you have the manager
Totally.
then has the opportunity to be more creative and use inspiration and be more free to make unique choices rather than trying to figure out what is this thing that they're actually looking at.
Such a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about just like your simple question on how to define marketing effectiveness?
Yeah.
Like, I expected this elaborate, making sure your your product is top of mind, blah, 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 blah. But it was literally just meeting your goals.
Yeah.
Aligning your organizational objectives and meeting your goals. That's marketing effectiveness. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And then the other part that's related to that one was like, he made that great analogy about looking for evidence where the light shines. Like, don't just look where there's the light. Like the Facebook likes was an example that he had, that every platform out there has data, but it's not all good data.
Totally. And that was such a great analogy. Like, you lost your keys, but you're only looking in one area. That's where the light is. And your keys are in a totally different, spot. But I think that's such a great example of sometimes when you think organizationally, you have your own data sets that likely keep pointing you to the same outcome, because it's just by nature of the data set that you're working with. And if you're not expanding that data set, or you're not augmenting it with, research. Have you heard of research before? I know this is kind of new.
Yeah,
Ella
weird.
brought it up, remember? But
research. I remember something about that. Yeah.
But you're augmenting that with consumer research and just everything else to help build a bigger aperture, if you will, to kind of get you to those outcomes. Again, it's one of those things where I thought, that's just such a great analogy, especially even when I think about my day to day, and I'm sure you're seeing this as well. It's like, organizationally, clients will always just use the data sets that they're comfortable with. That may just be showcasing a similar story time and time again. And I think it becomes dangerous.
Yeah. Like it might just be the ones that they not even that they're comfortable with, just that they have. Sales are down. Why? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to look at Facebook.
Yeah. That's right.
Let me get on that. I'll find the answer for you, and Facebook will have it. Maybe not. You might need to go somewhere else for that.
It's funny. We're doing this exercise at work where we're kind of showcasing orders by day, and then we're trying to look at, how many impressions were served, or how many, what was the traffic like by day. And we're looking at that through one lens, like paid marketing. And I asked the teams, like, well, how about you look at what the email or the one-to-one campaigns look like and when the emails were sent? Why don't you look at that as well? Because you can't just look at it just from what you've done on a paid side.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you're looking at things that are also happening peripherally from the organization as well, that you're augmenting that. And I think it's all too often it would have just been easier just to stay on what can I control on the paid side versus taking that one step back. It's like, it's not just what you do.
Yeah.
There's other things that are happening, right? And it's those little things. I think your conversation with Koen was just like a lot of these small little aha moments. Another one that I love that he talked about, and I don't think this is talked about enough, is Diageo's effectiveness and efficiency 2x2.
Yeah. I made a know that too.
I'm like, oh, this one's gold. This one's gold. Because I could see that he's easily being adopted and used in a post-campaign report. Where do you rank from an effectiveness and an efficiency perspective? How often is it going to be both in the top right? Not very, but.
Yeah. Because from what each campaign would be by nature, probably more likely you're going to have something that's very effective, and then over time
Yep.
it'll become less effective but more efficient,
But
and
more
vice
efficient.
versa, right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just thought that was
Yeah, I love that one too.
so good.
Well, and that ROI is not an effectiveness metric. We've had that conversation before, but to hear
I
it from
have it
yeah,
right here.
yeah, that was really good too. Because and
Yeah.
plotted on that graph, it's not on the effectiveness axis.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because
I
it's
wrote the exact
divided
same
by the
thing.
investment, so it has to be an efficiency metric.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like when you think about, I mean, he's got the other thing he had talked about was, well, even on efficiency, the idea that you've got efficiency is not necessarily controlled exclusively by marketing.
Mm.
Or put another way, efficiency is a team effort,
Yes.
right? Like you've got people
that's
in
a good one.
sales, you've got people in marketing, you've got people in product, you've got people in distribution, all of that. You've got people in product design. All of that matters in
Yep.
order to get the product in front of people so that they can buy more, and then the marketing dollars, or more people can buy more, and the marketing dollars you're investing in that can be more efficiently spent to reach more people who have access to it. You know what I mean? Like it's so important to your point earlier, not take on the responsibility exclusively for marketing, to say this is why we're getting, only the paid ads are delivering a return of some kind
Exactly.
today. There's lots of other factors involved.
Yes.
I know, it's so funny when you hear somebody like that who says it all so well, you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. When you're sitting there trying to explain it yourself, I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Why are the words coming out of my mouth?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he really, really well spoken. And I even love the conversation you guys had around, let me see how he put this. I have it in quotes here. Your customers are not you, or assuming your customers are like you.
Yeah.
And I think we often talk about those echo chambers. We often talk about, like, we think a consumer is, because we're consumers as well, that they simply just act like us. And it's like, make sure you're standing up for the customer when things don't make sense.
Yeah.
And I think he talked about when he was working for Amazon, the
chair in the room,
the chair in the room, etc. And I just, again, for me, it was one of those moments where you're like, yeah, it's another, like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But how often when you see a pricing hike, or like your client comes to you and say, we're going to increase our price, it's like, are you standing up for the customer and saying that's not a good idea?
Yeah.
Or even on our side, like, it's not something that we naturally do.
Yeah.
Because we're looking in the best interests of clients, or say like our organizations in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, he had that other, I tried to write it down exactly just so I didn't butcher it, but I think he sent me some emails later on with the links. But when you're a well-known brand in a mature market, if you drop price by 10%, you expect an increase in sales of 25%, if I got that right. If you double your ad budget, you'll increase sales by 5 to 10%. So those were, like, I thought, really interesting evidence-based data points to go, okay, well, if we do these things, here's what our expectation would be. And then you can benchmark against these best practices, like world-class marketing best practices.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, because a lot of times you get asked, like, well, what's it going to do for me? You're like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I just want it.
I mean,
I want to get we need sales. I got to get a price discount. Well, how much?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just more. The bigger, the better. Can you get more budget? Well, how much? Double. What are you going to get? Double the sales. Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many good things in there.
What else did I have here? You guys talked about old world marketing. people tend to just all run in the same direction at times. And sometimes it's just like being a byproduct of comfort or just a way of working, way of doing, things like that. I thought that was an interesting. And then he also talked the most important things, the 3 important things that he had highlighted there. It's like segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure you're starting there, which I thought, again, was just served as a great reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really a lot of that is like market orientation, segmentation.
Totally.
Understanding the market. Targeting would be strategy, who you're choosing, who you're not choosing. And then positioning is the beginning part of the execution element, which is around the messaging, how you're going to position the product and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so good.
He's really good.
He's really smart.
He's really smart. It was a great conversation, honestly, and I feel terrible that I couldn't have been there, but like I said at the beginning here, when you come across individuals like this that are actively also in the education side and educating new marketers and things like that, like I am encouraged, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the right stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think you need perspective to also say, here's some of the things. You need enough perspective on all of the stuff that's been published to know which is good and which isn't. And I think it's easy just to read all of it and go, no, I'll take all of this. Like Simon Sinek, start with now, or start with why, not start with
why.
Yeah. It's
Mark Binkley says start with now.
Yeah. There's some of that. Oh, you're gonna make me wheeze. Here comes the emphysema.
You got this, buddy.
Oh, deep breath. Anyway, yeah, like I think having a critical, if you read enough of this stuff or absorb enough, learn, watch, whatever, you begin to start developing, I think, some kind of sniff test.
Totally.
Like a BS sniff test.
Yes.
And I think that's so great to have somebody can help you get there quicker, like Koen, to be able to point you in some of the right directions in terms of what kinds of materials to read and what kinds of things to look for. More often than not, it's not the shiny new book that came out.
No. And I also have to call this out. The fact that he makes all his literature available for free.
Yeah.
On his webpage.
Yeah.
Like, I would strongly encourage everyone that's listening to this podcast to bookmark. We'll put a link, obviously, in the show notes, but bookmark that page. Like, there's so much information there that it's gold.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, this was a really fun chat, and I'm glad you came in spirit on that journey with me. To be honest with you, I feel like it was like my arm was missing or something. It was the weirdest thing. Maybe that's why my brain short circuited. But yeah, it wasn't quite the same not having you there. So it's good to be able to do this one with you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
man.
Okay, and so on to the next one, V, or before the next one.
Get it, put on your running shoes because we have to go
chase some profitability.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
There, you picked it up. Yes.
I did it. I'm going to do it. As long as I don't start dying.
Coughing. There he goes.
You're going to stop making me laugh.
Okay. Stop making me laugh, he said.
Oh.
Okay. You got this.
Take it easy, buddy.
All right, bye.
Bye.